Over the last few weeks on This Epic Life, we've been exploring the theme of community and how to rally circles of people around us to support us and our work in reaching more and more people in the world. I've been joking about this concept of I got this, which is not to be confused with confidence, but I got this is the over-reliance on yourself instead of leaning on the amazing people around you. So if you're more interested in We Got This, I'd love for you to be the first to know about our launch that's coming next week. You could check it out at www.ignite.thisepiclife.com/ripple. That's ignite.thisepiclife.com/ripple. And in keeping with the theme, I'm about to introduce you to one of my favorite allies and biggest teachers over the last 7 years.
Ooh, this beat is epic.
Welcome to This Epic Life podcast, where we explore the connection between building a conscious life and building a conscious team or a conscious business. We also break down 3 powerful permissions with our guests. These are the permission to chill or to be with what is. The permission to feel all the feels. We spend a lot of time here today breaking down the science of feeling and emotion. And finally, permission to glow in the dark. Interpret it however you wish. I will be your host. My name is Christopher Carter. My friends call me KC. I'm a coach for founders and executives and meditation teacher for organizations. And now let's meet this week's guest. Hey, beautiful people. It is KC from This Epic Life. I'm basking in the afterglow of one of the most incredible, loving, powerful weekends that's ever blown through our household. Our family opened up our home for the staff of the Camp Good Life Project. Jonathan Fields and his amazing wife, Stephanie, organized this the previous 5 summers. And instead of doing the camp this summer, we decided to just have a staff meetup out here in Northeast Ohio. What I'm really present to is that the quality of my life and how I enjoy things or toggle between enjoying my success or being completely at effect of my success or how busy we tend to get, it all comes down to the quality of the people that we roll with. And the journey through Good Life Project has been one of the most profound experiences for me in my career. That was 7 years ago. I got to meet Jonathan Fields and work with him and his staff over the course of a full year. And part of his staff was this amazing young woman who I believe was about 25 or 26 at the time, named Emiliya Zhivotovskaya. Emiliya has grown to be my little sister in some ways. She was certainly my teacher back in the day, and I continue to learn so much from her. But when you're in her presence, she's one of those people that just makes you think, whatever this person has going on, I want a little bit of that. I always took it as a compliment when people asked me, what are you on and where can I get some? I was like, wow, they must think I'm either positive or hopeful or full of possibility or whatever. Emiliya takes that a few steps beyond. She not only has the natural disposition of somebody who's incredibly magnetic and somebody I would call a battery, but she also has this deep well of scientific knowledge on the science and psychology of thriving. But it's not limited to that either, because she also lives and applies the art of flourishing and the art of living. So when I think of This Epic Life podcast, she's somebody who I've always wanted to have on, and I'm so grateful that she passed through my home and my office, and I was able to sit down with her yesterday for this interview. A little bit about her formal bio. Emiliya Zhivotovskaya is the CEO and founder of the Flourishing Center, a New York-based benefit corporation, that's a B Corp, that is dedicated to increasing the flourishing of individuals, organizations, and communities. Emiliya is the creator of the wildly successful Certification in Applied Positive Psychology, or CAP program. I have many clients and friends who have gone through it, and they all rave about it. That is delivered in 12 cities across the US, Canada, and online. CAP to date has trained over 1,300 practitioners. She is the creator of the Bounce Back Better program, which we get into a lot here around resilience, the Positive Psychology Coaching Certification, the Flourishing Skills Group program, co-founder of the Positive Educator Certification program, creator of the PERMA V model, and the 5I Change Agent model. The woman is an electric circuit of productivity. Emiliya holds a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania in positive psychology and is currently pursuing her PhD in mind-body medicine from Saybrook University, where she's also an adjunct faculty member. She holds a master certified coach credential with the International Coaching Federation, as well as over a dozen certifications in modalities ranging from coaching to yoga, Reiki, intensati, Thai massage, biofeedback, motivational interviewing, and more. You can learn more about her many training programs and resources to thrive at theflourishingcenter.com. Emiliya is one of these people that's so helpful to know because I'm not a quant. I don't like quoting data and research studies in my presentations, workshops, and when I teach meditation classes. So she is usually the last person I call right before I walk in to deliver a workshop. She is a Rolodex of deep, deep knowledge. And I'm so excited that in this conversation, she kind of breaks down the science behind the 3 permissions. We start with permission to glow in the dark. We spend a lot of time on the permission to feel all the feels and the science around connection and emotion. And then we finish off with some of the science around permission to chill. So the meditation, the stilling practice, and how that contributes to thriving and flourishing. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. I hope you get a lot out of it. I hope you learn a lot. And I hope you geek out and pull from and source yourself from Emiliya's brilliant mind, but even more so, her gigantic, loving heart. This Epic Life presents Emiliya Zhivotovskaya. I take personal pride in properly pronouncing your name. Emiliya Zhivotovskaya, welcome to This Epic Life podcast.
Thank you, Casey. It's so amazing to be here.
How did I ever dupe you or anyone into coming to Akron, Ohio?
You just built a fort, you built the tent, and we came because we love being around you. And you gathered our community of Camp Good Life Project staff, and the planets aligned, and everyone's schedule, well, most of the schedule is aligned, and it's just been such a joy to spend the past 3 days with you.
Wow. You're one of these people in my life. You're such a battery that I wanted to figure out a way to physically and emotionally exhaust you. So I threw my entire pool, children, the whole shebang, pets. Did it work? Are you at all tired?
No, instead you actually turned me into an addict because now I just need more Carters, more Carters, more Carters.
That could be arranged. I think you adopted a few nephews and nieces this weekend.
And the dogs.
Yeah.
Can't do without the dogs.
I can't have a conversation with you without kind of running the full dynamic gamut of thriving, flourishing, positivity, all the highs of the emotional scale with the balance and the yang of the deeper depths as well. I need a little bit of your backstory. I know you've shared it in a bunch of different ways over the years, but when you think about your current work in resilience and the Bounce Back Better program, how does your backstory support that work?
Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, I feel like I accidentally came to becoming a resilience expert and someone who was thrown into trying to better understand how do people get through obstacles. My first experiences of needing to use skills and tools to overcome adversity started probably when I was a young kid, because my family and I immigrated to the US when I was 5.5 from the Ukraine. A lot of political upheaval happening at that time, the fall of communism, and my parents came here pursuing the American dream for their kids. And so there was obviously challenges that must have brought, but I was a kid. It wasn't really until I was 14 where my family faced our traumatic life event, which was my brother drowned in an accident trying to rescue his fiance who was drowning. And that was like the first major life obstacle I'd faced. And my family suffered greatly as a result of it. My mom became diagnosed with a cancer 2 years later, ovarian cancer that she fought for about 10 years. My dad became diabetic shortly afterwards. And my family went through a lot of obstacles with that challenge, but also at the same time, I flourished and I thrived despite the heartache and the trauma and the loss and the taking care of my mother and tons of doctor's visits and surgeries and chemos and radiations and all sorts of other things that just were kind of common in my day-to-day life. And that was kind of called it my split life, because on the one hand, there was obstacles and difficulties. And I also was a really happy, flourishing teenager. I had a job as a party entertainer. I made people happy for hours at a time. I created experiences for people, and I got to use my crazy strengths and skills and nourish and nurture those and have a pretty rich life. And I remember throughout my whole childhood, people would come up to me and they would say things like, Emiliya, you're so amazing. You know, everything you and your family have gone through, all of your obstacles, all of the stuff you've overcome, or this business you've built, like, you're so amazing. And I remember I used to kind of smile and nod and say, thank you so much. You know, I really appreciate that. But back inside my head, I used to just always kind of cringe, because I didn't want to hear people tell me I was amazing, because in my mind, I was sort of like, I'm not doing anything special. I'm just being me, just doing what I do. But those words used to somewhat haunt me, because I used to ask this question, like, well, is it just me? Like, am I just amazing? Like, do people, like, what happens? Like, how do some people go through traumatic life events and they bounce back and they grow as a result of it? And others seem to not. They seem to plateau, or they do worse. And I remember as a kid, I had this, what felt like a choice, and it probably was because of all the movies I watched. It was like, this is the main character's obstacle, and this is that D-Day moment where they make a decision. How am I going to connect with this? But that actually brought me to studying positive psychology, because I'd found out that a field actually existed that was studying not just how do we fix what's wrong with people or what's wrong in a person's life, but actually teach them preventatively skills for helping them be more resilient, to help them thrive, and also help everyday people identify their purpose, their meaning, and how to live a life of flourishing. So when I found out that this scientific field existed, I was just all in, and I was super blessed to have entered a field somewhat early. The field was started in 1998, and I did my degree in 2006. I was part of the second graduating class at UPenn, and have been, and I came in with that question of just really saying, like, I want to understand, what is this thing called resilience, and how do people learn to become more resilient if it is actually a skill set that they can learn? And so bringing those skills into my own life and being able to continue to work with this, I think the biggest thing that I've learned over the years about resilience is that the type of massive adversities that I've faced, most people are actually naturally resilient during those times, that we as human beings are wired for this ability to persevere and persist. And this actually can really throw people, because sometimes the hardest times of their life become the ones that are almost simplest. Like, people die and all of a sudden you just jump into action. You know what to do. You gather yourself with people get sick, and that becomes our focus. And actually, the type of resilience I learned that people needed was not for these massive life events as much as the day-to-day
like the
stress.
Micro events. And
yeah, and so that's what I've been focused on, in addition to my work at I built a company called the Flourishing Center 11 years ago. We've been teaching individuals and organizations the skills and tools for resilience, for happiness, for well-being, and recently I've decided to add in love and the capacity to be loved as something that we are consciously teaching people, because it feels like it was a piece of the equation that I was missing. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm just beyond blessed that I get to live this work as I teach this work.
How old were you when your brother passed, when you lost your brother?
I was 14.
And how old were you when your mother passed?
I was 26.
So that 12-year gap between those two losses, looking back and kind of knowing the skills and the research and everything that you've immersed yourself in, what do you attribute, or is there anything else other than your mom just developing cancer? Was the timing of her decline or her diagnosis, was it impacted by losing your brother? Yeah,
I wholeheartedly think that it was. And that was definitely something that brought me into the other field that I study, which is mind-body medicine. I felt very much that even as an adolescent, I knew that my mother's illness stemmed from this stress that she faced. And I came from a very traditional Russian family where you don't talk about your feelings, you don't talk about your thoughts. And I very much knew that my mom in order to get through this trauma, she had to take her emotions, which we would normally say are, energy and motion, or should be fluid, should be able to move through us. And she had to freeze them. She had an ice box in her heart, in her womb for her son. And she never let those ice cubes melt, because I think she thought that they would turn into an avalanche and that the pain would it would break her. And so my mom kind of pulled it all in and held together to be strong for me, to be strong for my father. And I can just recall going through so many doctor's visits with my mom. I mean, I would say well over hundreds of visits. Wow. Between the complications she had with her surgeries. She had about a dozen different issues at some point. And every single medical intake, they would ask her about her history. They would ask her about her blood pressure. They would ask about my grandparents. And then I would have to be like, oh, and by the way, my mom lost her son like 6 years ago, by the way. And it was always like an added thing that I felt like I was adding. And as a kid, I just kept saying, there's got to be more to this medical condition than just biological here, because firstly, it's ovarian cancer. And back then, people did not survive ovarian cancer for more than 6 months at a time. She lived for 10 years. And she had this rare cancer that, if we look at the emotionality of it, it was in her womb, it was in her ovaries, and she lost her son. And the stress, and we know that stress can initiate cancers, right? Because stress lowers our immune system. But this cancer that kept coming back, and by the time my mom actually did leave this planet, embodied, her ovarian cancer was actually ovarian cancer in her colon. And so it's like, I just kept sort of thinking, and she had it was very, very difficult the last 3 years of her death, because my mom had to have her colon removed, and then parts of her large intestine were then threaded outside of her body. So she had a bag, and then the tissue died. It exploded in her stomach. She had lived with this like open wound for about 4 months while it healed.
So it was about as rough as it could possibly be.
Yeah. And by the end of it, I think the thing I learned about emotions just came, so the metaphors, you just couldn't contain it, that literally my mom's shit, I don't want to be graphic on this podcast, but literally her shit would kind of be exploding out of her, because this bag that she had didn't always stay on well because of the nature of the surgeries. And all I could say is that all of this shit that my mom tried to hold in, all this pain, by the end, she just had it was coming out. And so I really believe that it made me so clear about the importance of us learning how to work with our emotions. I think a lot of our culture, we're not taught how to deal with anger, with worry, with embarrassment, with vulnerability, with frustration, with rage. And what happens is we don't trust our emotions, and we don't know how to digest them. So in positive psychology, one of our big buzzwords is we want to teach people how to digest their life experiences, digest their emotions, how to feel all their feels. Part of the manifesto for the work that you do, Casey. And I think I saw it firsthand that there was an energetic, a psycho-spiritual and emotional component to her illness that made me want to learn more about this. And it also made me really conscious about well-being, because as a teenager, you don't think much about your own health, but then you actually witness a person going through cancer treatment. And I realized I'm trying to help my mother eat for her chemotherapies and boost her immune system. I had to start studying nutrition. I had to start studying environmental stress. I had to start studying these things because it was like the only thing I could do to help her. I even went to go and study and get certified to do Reiki, because when my mom was keeled over in pain from some of the chemos that she was getting, my hands just sort of and naturally started to warm up, and I would put my hands on her, and it would bring her soothing, and it would help her feel better. And so it was like kind of like anything I can do to help her in this process, I was trying to do. And those just kind of naturally got integrated into what I do as a practitioner.
We should just cover the 3 permissions, because I think they're so integral to your story. And I've been learning so much more about them as I have more of these conversations. I'll lay out the 3 permissions, and I'd love for you to kind of use that language to talk about your current work in resilience for others. Permission to chill, as I'm starting to understand it now, is less about permission to relax and more about permission to be with what's happening. So it's simultaneously a passive and active process. And I'm really curious about what you had to learn and discover about being with those pretty intense, not only the lows and the depths, but also the highs. Because here you were a kid in the outside world making balloon animals in the Hamptons, right? and I mostly know you as that party in a box, like my female doppelganger, right? Like, roll us into a party and it'll happen, right? That's permission to chill, is to be with. Permission to feel all the feels is permission to be with our full humanity and all the messy emotions. And then permission to glow in the dark, which I think is your life's work, which is giving people the ability to flourish and thrive.
Yeah.
What permission most resonates with you today, and what comes up for you when you think about the three permissions, either as a framework itself or as anyone that speaks to you?
I think the one that I'm currently dancing with the most on a day-to-day basis is the permission to glow in the dark for me, because I think I've been living on purpose most of my life. I kind of was one of these people who just came in with a really clear fire in me. Like, I'm here to make the world a better place, and I own it. I didn't always say it, but I always internally owned it. But interestingly enough, right now I'm really working on recognizing that, especially, I started working when I was 14 and as an entertainer, and I never stopped working since, right? So I feel that even just the summer is the first time I've actually had a summer-ish since I was 14, like really taking a lot of downtime, and I'm really embracing more of my divine feminine energy, recognizing that I've done a lot and have been very go, fiery for again, 20 years now. And so for me, the permission to glow in the dark is I had this aha moment about 3 months ago where I realized, as far as I've gone on my inner yang, on my divine masculine of creation and doing and serving, and I have the exact same capacity in my divine feminine, which is just the capacity to be sensual and yummy and receive and take it easy. And then the first thought that went through my mind after I had that realization was like, oh, but you're going to be too much. You'll be too much to handle. It's
a common one. It's a common slap back.
Yeah. You're like, well, you're already so much. You already glow so bright, and you already are this. Like, will you be too much to handle? Which is really tied to that very basic human fear that we all have, which is, will I be accepted? Will I be ostracized? Will I not fit in? Right. So I am embracing that and allowing more of my wholeness even more in a way that I didn't even realize I had the potential for. But of course, like once you see it, it's like, all right, now I can work on this.
We have a name for that. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Laura Neff, amazing coach, she gave me the concept of permission to glow in the light, which is, the dark is kind of a prerequisite. The world needs it right now. And the people that are here to be light workers, we have to figure out a way to expand and step it up too. Yeah. Your work ethic is so legendary. I talk and joke about it to so many people I know, like mutual friends of ours, like JJ Weisberg. We talk about it. Stephanie Fields, Jonathan's wife. I talked to her one day on the phone. She said, I just ran into Emiliya, and I swear she had a blowout in her hair at like 7 a.m. She's dressed to the nines to go do some interview or give a talk. She's on rollerblades holding her dog under her arm. I was like, Jesus. I'm like, is she still? And a coffee in the other hand. Right. I'm like, is she whipping up balloon animals at Irving Farms over on the Upper West Side? I mean, you are just such a force of nature. And I experienced that with you this weekend, just being around the kids in the pool and chilling, that you are so wired not only to do for the purpose of doing on purpose, but to be so much for so many people all at once, to hold space for so many. And just for you to receive and lay back and sleep. I don't know if I've ever seen you do that before. It was just cool to see the balance happening. Thank you. Yeah, and it kind of ties into, I think, to the other permissions, which is, the first one, let's actually work backwards. The second one, feel all the feels, because firstly, one of our buzzwords in positive psychology, many people hear the word positive psychology and they think it's about just being positive or thinking positive or just being happy. There are no weeds in my garden. Yeah, which it's not about. In fact, the founder of the field, Martin Seligman, he regrets calling it positive psychology. Just it's too late now, because that's the word that's been adopted for all this time. But he really should have called it a flourishing psychology, because positive just meant north of neutral, not just negative back to zero.
zero, but into the positive. But the buzzword that we use is actually the permission to be human and to feel all the feels. Is that we as human beings are wired with the capacity to feel every single emotion. And unlike other animals in the animal kingdom, they can't choose their emotions. They just react, right? My adorable Pomeranian poodle, she sees another dog and she just barks at another dog. She doesn't have the capacity in her brain to say, oh, barking really upsets mommy, maybe I shouldn't do that. She doesn't withhold her emotions, she just experiences them. We as human beings, we have this beautiful propensity to change, to choose our response, which I know is what you're all about in your work in mindfulness, right? We can choose. And so it's for me, this is also my current journey in embracing the other parts of me. It's like, this is what enables us to feel all the feels, is that we can make this change and that we can say, hey, I see this. I see how I want to be in the world and I see how I'm currently being. And the two currently don't match. And so let me make the changes. Let me be patient. Let me learn the skills that I need to learn. Let me embrace what's being mirrored to me. And so there's quite a bit of science behind the feel all the feels, the importance of learning how to, so I define emotional intelligence by the 3 N's. Emotional intelligence is about the ability to notice, name, and navigate our emotions. So we need a mindfulness and awareness to just notice. And this involves learning how to be in our body, being able to notice when we're being triggered and just be aware that something is happening. Then we gain a mastery by being able to name it, to be able to say, oh, I'm triggered. Oh, I'm feeling vulnerable. Oh, something is happening here. And we can use we know that emotionally intelligent people have words to describe their emotions. So those feelings are not just weird things that just happen to them. They can actually understand them. And then navigate. How well do I actually move through that emotion that I have? And I can notice, name, and navigate within myself. I can notice, name, and navigate within others. And that's this elusive thing called emotional intelligence, which we know is highly correlated with success and well-being, that I really think of when I think about that second permission.
When you work with people or you meet people that have high EQ, high emotional intelligence, what are the things you notice about them that they've worked on that craft? Do they give voice to their emotions?
I would say they do all 3 N's. Okay. So I see them being able to notice, name, and navigate within themselves,
so
and notice, name, and navigate. Yep. So they're able to identify. I'll walk in with my emotionally intelligent friends. I'll walk in a room and we'll have plans to do something, and it'll be instantaneously like, wait, what's going on? Like something's off here, right? And what's the vibe? What's happening? And the big one is just navigating, being able to ask yourself. It could actually probably make the navigate the word need. What's needed of me in this moment? So what is it that I'm feeling? What do I need? What does this other person need? And being able to act accordingly. And that's really hearty emotional intelligence. And we can build all those things. So we can build our mindfulness and our awareness of our body. We can build our awareness of other people's facial expressions, the energy that they're giving off. And the more present we can be, the better we notice. We can become better at naming, which sometimes for some people, when I train this work, starts with actually giving them a list of emotion words.
Right, like the emotional scale.
Yeah, building a vocabulary. And children, if you ask a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, what's wrong? I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm angry. Like there's very basic words, and it's
more like primary colors versus a gradient.
Yeah, or it's thinking about if we were cooking up a meal. Our emotions are the spice of life, and we've got tarragon, and we've got turmeric, and we've got pepper and chili, and all these other flavors of emotions we can experience. And the more words we have to actually experience it, the richer the framework. Otherwise, it's sort of like only being able to know how to cook with sugar and salt and pepper, right? We have a lot of varieties of what we can experience as humans.
So if you were going to give somebody a tool, a simple practice of giving voice to I am feeling, I am experiencing, how does that show up for you in your life when you are not feeling your best or you're noticing something come up for you? How do you give voice to it?
I first check in with my body. So I viscerally experience my emotions, and I use my breath a lot to recognize when I'm in a more negative emotional space. I can usually feel my breath shortens. And so I just pause and I just tune in and I think about where am I feeling this? What am I actually feeling? And usually that capacity, it all kind of happens in just one big, bubble. But whatever the circumstances is it causing me to experience, I just pause and I notice it and I breathe into it. And then I ask myself, what do I need? And that's the navigation. So sometimes I need a nap. Sometimes I need a break. Sometimes I need to journal. Sometimes I just need to just stop whatever thought pattern I'm thinking. And then I need to redirect myself, because I ask myself, how do I want to show up in the world? That was an epic quote that I got from one of my mentors early on, Dr. Sri Kumar Rao. He used to, with a very heavy Indian accent, say, how do you want to show up in the world? And so I asked myself that question, because it's not always switching into the positive. Sometimes I'm like, how do I want to be right now? I really want to feel my anger right now. So let me put on music and let me dance it out. Or like, let me take a pillow and scream it out. And other times it's like I'm walking down the street and I'm just having worrying thoughts that I do not need to have.
Yeah.
And all I need to do is use one of my many tools to shift gears. So I'll walk down the street and I just start doing a rampage of appreciation, of gratitude. What am I grateful for? Or I get out of my own, I realize I'm so me centered right now. And I'll do this weird thing where I'm like walking down the street in New York City, and every single person I see, I look at them and I try to make eye contact, which rarely happens in New York, but I try. And in my mind, I think to myself, I love you and I love you and I love you.
Kindness, essentially.
Yep. And I'm love bombing every single person I see. It's like I try to fall in love with every single stranger I see. And that usually will last me about a block or two, and I shift and I feel differently. So it's not about instantaneously shifting. It's being able to have the awareness, like, what do I need? What is this moment asking of me? And what do I need? And then being able to follow through on it.
Okay, so a couple important points that I heard for our listeners is that you're not just pivoting up into the positive all the time, trying to skip steps in the emotional scale. You're trying to realize where you are and take the next logical step, or to be exactly where you are. And then also the loving kindness practice of taking yourself out of your own crap and projecting love on other people.
Yeah. Now, if I'm super triggered, like really, really stressed out, and what I need to do is just come back more into the present moment, I've got a mindfulness technique that I use that is just very popular in the mindfulness-based stress reduction space. I just actually start like looking at things and naming what I'm seeing, because that helps me come into the present moment. So if I was super triggered in this moment, I'd be like microphone, Casey, window, bricks.
This is cool. This reminds me of ontological coaching. You're basically separating facts from interpretations.
Yep.
Like facts, because the interpretations are what's making you suffer. Or
and in the moment, it's like present, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's and what we do is we train ourselves in these little skills. And I think of it as sometimes when people ask me, what do I do? I say, I help people use their gear shift. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about a car, right? If you're a good old manual driving car, if you're in first gear, you can't get to second without passing through neutral. Or if you're somehow stuck in fourth gear, you can't just get into first gear, right? You have to pass through neutral. You got to work your way down. And I feel that most people, especially when we look at our emotional experience, don't know how to use their gear shifts. Yeah. They've never been taught. And so what happens is emotions just feel like things that happen to them, as opposed to things that they can actually do. And when we cultivate these individual skills, I can shift my gears. And that's something I actually hear people say and they admire about me, that I'm usually humbled by, that I just say, no, this is just a practice. Like, you can do this too.
Playing the game a long time.
Yeah, I can shift really well. I can shift in my life experiences. People would be like, wow, like you just had this breakup, and one would think that something like this would be really sticky. About 8 months ago, I ended a pretty intensive relationship with a sociopath. Fascinating life experience. I was about to get engaged, and I was about to, it was just crazy. And I would say that and it's not time bound. I'm not trying to get through these things rather quickly, but people will always say like, wow, Emiliya, like it's amazing how something that was so psychologically abusive, like you're moving through it so well. It's not necessarily fast, but it's well. And I think it's because I have these skills that enable me to really metabolize it. So a lot of times when people just feel negative emotion, they think they're supposed to just put on a happy face. That would be like eating something and then you puke it up. We say something's off with your digestive system.
Yeah.
Or if you like eat something and you have diarrhea, we say something's off with your digestive system. You're not absorbing the nutrients that you need. Or if you're constipated, like that's not healthy. And if we treated our emotional life the way that we do our digestive system, it's a really powerful metaphor to say, like, how do we want to work with those things that come our way?
I picture you being kind of like a 21 or 22 speed bike on the Tour de France, whereas I roll like a beach cruiser with maybe 2 to 3 gears. Because at the season of my life with children and stuff, I noticed that anger blows in sometime between after work transitioning into dinner time. And if I have to get food on the table and everyone's looking at me for food, the storm just blows in. And then that becomes my mindfulness practice. I hear you just having many, many gradients that you've kind of carved out over the years, and just the nuance of just eking back up into the higher end of the scale, if you choose to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I call that personal mastery, but I also celebrate what you do as personal mastery as well. Again, it's can you show up in the world the way that you want to?
Yeah.
And what is the space between stimulus and response? Even if I've blown up at my kids and I was triggered and I was angry, that's not a problem.
Right.
It's just, at what point do you go, wait, let me realize what I just did.
Yeah.
And let me go back and let me actually use this as a teaching moment to connect with my kids around what I experienced. Apologize for behavior that you felt you wish you had done differently. Say, here's what I want to do differently next time, right? That's still stimulus and response. And so I celebrate all of it as just all of us learning how to be better humans, with the fact that we are human animals, and we are, this is something I heard Jill Bolte Taylor say recently, and she said that part of our issue is that we think that we are thinking beings that feel, as opposed to recognizing that we are feeling creatures that think.
I happen to think, yeah.
And so the more we can keep this in mind, if our school systems were set up for feeling creatures that think as opposed to thinking creatures that feel, we would have a very different approach. And that's actually part of some of the work that I do, is actually in the positive education space, and we're training teachers in these skills for kids. But we would actually make this a practice, not just a discipline, actually curriculum for step by step teaching people how to do these things.
As we come full circle, why are you always my phone a friend lifeline when I'm walking into, we called each other at the perfect time a couple weeks ago, because you were walking into a huge corporate event and I'd been doing more corporate work. And I was walking into something where I needed a lot of resilience support for a training I was doing. Just give me the connection for you between a mindfulness or meditation practice and resilience. So basically permission to chill.
Yeah, I totally celebrate what you were just saying about the permission to chill, which is just to be with, right? Just to be with what we're experiencing. And there's a tremendous amount of research on the importance to actually down-regulating the nervous system and actually learning how to apply our brakes. We know that stress is an issue in our culture, but not the way that many people think that it is. Most of us do not have our gas pedal to the metal when it comes to our stress response. Most of us are idling, and we have this low-level idle of stress that is actually part of the issue. It's not that we have very heavy gas pedals. It's actually that most people don't know how to use their brakes. They don't know how to create calm. They don't know how to create ease. So when we take on practices that actually train that experience, we're training our parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake response in our body. We're actually giving our body the opposite of what it needs from this go, go, go energy. When we cultivate mindfulness, we strengthen the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is that ability to choose our response. So a little bit of brain training every single day helps us be more resilient and not be so emotional, not be so reactive. And that is the key to resilience. Resilience is, how do you mind the gap between here's what happens and here's how I react? The more you can choose your response, the more resilient you're going to be. We also are just physically healthier. We boost our immune system. We tend to also have more positive emotions present as we let a lot of those things settle to the bottom of our snow globe as it settles down. What tends to naturally rise is our well-being responses, our health. And so
gratitude is the biggest one I notice. If people do a 30-day challenge, they have these waves at some point of just, oh my God, I'm just grateful I get to show up and do this.
And one of the interesting energy medicine connections I've been making lately is, so the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our relaxation response, has the physical actual nerve that drives that is our vagus nerve. And the word vague is actually related to vagus nerve because it was said to be this wandering nerve that just goes all over our body. And every other nerve in our body has a corresponding organ, like the optic nerve goes to the eye, the cardiac nerve goes to the heart. And here's this nerve that just kind of goes everywhere. But we know nature is perfection. It doesn't just do anything by accident. And so interestingly enough, the yogis have actually known what the corresponding organ to the vagus nerve, to the relaxation response is. It's the kundalini. It's the energy body. And so what happens is the more we stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve, we actually stimulate our kundalini, that energy that just tends to naturally grow or rise from the base of our spine upward, which meditators have and yogis have known for thousands of years. And so we actually allow an energy to grow. We don't have to force energy to grow. We don't have to do things to energize ourselves. When we create the space for calm, for just being, that upliftment is usually energy that is firstly nourishing. It is gratitude, it's love, it's joyful, it's peace, it's bliss. But it takes a dedicated practice in order to allow yourself to do that, because we get stressed out 0 to 60 like a car in a second. And research shows that because the vagus nerve is just wired differently, the nerve plexuses literally are not biologically wired in the same way. It just takes more time. It takes more practice.
So consistency over time, practice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and your heart. And if I could just acknowledge you for a second, thank you for the massive vortex of positivity and love you've brought into my life. You were my teacher 7 years ago in Jonathan's program for the immersion. And then we got to work alongside each other at camp. I would not be able to do what I do without your guidance. So thanks so much.
I love you so much. Thank you, Casey.
And thank you so much for listening. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, or you know somebody who would, please, by all means, share the love. You could also pop on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Your reviews mean the world to us, and it really helps spread this Epic Life podcast. You can find us everywhere online at This Epic Life. And until next week, glow in the dark.